All right. Hi, my name is Shane Brody. I'm a trans man that's traveling around the country. I drove from Alaska. It was still snowing. There was about 5-6 inches of snow on the highway, and I have a subcompact, so I'm rather expert at driving in the snow now. It was adrenaline most of the way. Anyway, so I am traveling around the country interviewing trans people, non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, that sort of thing. And about identity, beliefs, religious, political, current events, that sort of thing. And I'm here in New Hampshire. I just traveled through several states. I was in Albany, New York, and then, you go to Vermont, and then you're in New Hampshire. And I have a pumpkin spice apple cider. This is non-alcoholic. This is my lunch drink. It's pretty cool. I got to have some pumpkin spices at some point, right? It's Halloween tonight, and it's very festive. And I'm here with a guest, and she's going to introduce herself, and we're going to get into conversation here.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm Cherie.
Okay.
And
and how would you identify? Yeah.
I would identify as a trans woman.
Okay. And are you from here?
Yep.
This
I've
area?
lived in New Hampshire most of my life.
Okay.
Brief stint in New Mexico when I was a kid.
Okay.
Went to school for a while in Massachusetts, but yes, I always end up back here.
Okay. What always brings you back to New Hampshire?
I just like it here. I've
Okay.
got a lot of family here, which is a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, I'm really an outdoors person.
Oh, really?
And this is probably one of the best places to be if you like to be outdoors.
For what kind of activities?
So I do a lot of hiking, all 4 seasons, doesn't matter.
Oh, really?
Weather, no, snow, sleet, rain.
Do you use do you do Nordic skiing or snowshoeing or something? Or?
I I started snowshoeing last year. That was the thing, but for the most part, with a lot of the trails that we have, especially up in the Whites, they're pretty well traveled. So micro spikes are generally all you need. Once the snow's packed down, you just give it 24 hours. All the snowshoers go up and they smash all the snow
break
down
trail
for you.
Oh,
exactly,
okay.
and then you go up and the trail's already pretty well packed. So you can make it up pretty easy with spikes.
So have you done Nordic skiing then?
So downhill, is that what we're
No,
referring to?
Nordic skiing is basically on the flat with little hills.
Oh, okay. We call that cross country skiing.
Oh yeah, same cross country.
Right. I've done it in the past.
Yeah.
I'm not active with it or anything
Yeah.
like that. Even with the activities that I do, there's a lot of equipment involved, and it can get a little pricey sometimes.
Yeah.
So for those purposes, I try to limit to what I'm doing. Last year we got snowshoes, so for the whole family that was probably close to about $400.
Yeah.
To get that together. If we got into cross country skiing, because I have to think about it. It's not just me that's going to be doing that. I've got 2 kids.
Okay.
So going out, and that's the same reason why we generally don't downhill ski. We are considering maybe getting into backcountry skiing at some point.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
I've got a 9-year-old, and the other one is turning 13 a little bit.
Okay. So, that too is a factor because skis are by weight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it's just like shoes. You buy a pair and then 6 months later, you have to go up. But sometimes you can find, you can rent stuff. You can rent equipment. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For us out here looking into it, for us to go out skiing for like a day, lift passes for a family, well, that's a couple $100. And then you're looking at ski rentals.
Nordic doesn't require lift passes though. Yeah.
Right. No, neither does backcountry skiing.
Yeah.
So if we were to go out and do that stuff, like even renting equipment, it gets to a point. We have enough other stuff on our plates. Between the hiking and the snowshoeing now, and the other things that we're doing, we're usually pretty good.
How about ice skating?
Nope. No time.
No. Yeah, I'm terrible at ice skating. I just thought I'd ask. So what do you do the other seasons? Are there like some nice little lakes to swim in or anything like that?
Sure. We'll go out. We do swimming trips. We have a whitewater kayak, which we just got last year. We did a whitewater rafting trip.
Whitewater, that's like that's like the dangerous stuff. Yeah.
It's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
But no, so the way we got into that was we went on, we had a huge family road trip that we did a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
COVID's still happening. We went basically all over the Northeast. We went from here out to like Niagara Falls, went down into Pennsylvania.
Okay. So you just made like a loop.
Yeah, we made a huge loop, came back up through like New York, Connecticut. There's nothing in Connecticut.
I agree, except for traffic cops. There's a lot of those.
Right.
Lots of speed traps.
Yeah, fortunately I wasn't the one driving at the time. So
and also signs with rules on them. There's quite a few of those. Anyway.
Yeah. So we came back up through that way. And while we were out, one of the places we stopped at was Ausable Chasm, which is it's just on the other side of the Vermont border into New York. It's a really, really cool place. And
is it up north or is it more like along
it's right across Lake Champlain. Like we took the ferry
north.
Across.
Okay.
I mean, there's places like, even right here where I live, which is right next to Concord. Yeah. We've got a great hiking spot that we go to after work sometime up on Great Hill. It's the second highest point in our town. And you get up to the top and you look out and you can see nothing but forest. And we're right next to the Capitol. So there's probably within 10 miles of that spot, there's got to be 40, 50,000 people that live there, and you can't see anything but trees. You can see out as far as Mount Washington.
You're talking about Manchester?
No, we're near Concord.
Okay.
So, Manchester's like 100 and something thousand people.
Oh, okay.
So, but we're right next to Concord, the capital, which I think is like 40 or 50,000 people that live there or something like that. I don't know. I don't have the statistics.
Sure. Pretty small.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the town that I live in right next to it, we're about 12,000 people here. Sure. Mm-hmm. So, you get up to the top of there and you can see hills, you can see mountains in the distance, you can see a lot of trees. There's like one smokestack and then, some power lines going through, but that's it. You can't even see anybody's house. From up there, and you're about 800 feet up. So
and this time of year is just so beautiful with all the changing leaves, and even I like the trees that just completely lose their leaves, and you see, the growth form of the branches and that sort of thing. I really like that, and where it's kind of mixed. There's some trees that have still their foliage. There's probably different species or whatever.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and then the ones that have completely gone bare. I like that kind of mix, and I like the coolness of this time of year. This morning there was some ice on my car. It was nice, yeah. But then it warmed up, and now it's fine. Yeah.
I imagine where you're from, there's a lot of ice on cars.
Yes, actually, yeah. But I mean, what's the latitude here? I don't know, 40 something.
We're up there, but not anywhere near as up as you are.
Yeah, it's like 20 degrees latitude difference.
We still get 8 hours of daylight in December. So
yeah. Sorry, we just ate, so I'm like, there's stuff in my teeth. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, it was great. So let's talk a little bit about your being a trans person.
Okay.
When did you first have ideas or feelings about that?
So that's a great question, and there's a couple of different answers to that. Mm-hmm. So if it was when I finally came to terms with it and was fully able to accept myself and realize what was going on, that was actually this past January. So not a very long time ago, but through, sitting down, talking things through and kind of thinking things out, it was probably there as early as age 5.
Okay.
Like I can remember.
Were you talking to people about that?
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is that, I'm in my 40s. And so at the time, there wasn't a lot, especially around in my family and stuff, that people knew about trans people. Yeah. I remember when I came out to my mom, one of the things, that she was like, there were signs, but, we didn't know what to even say, what to talk about. We didn't have the language for that.
Sure,
and
that was the 80s, right?
Yeah, that would have been the early to mid 80s. Yeah. And, so... it's one of those things. When I did ask her if she was surprised, she was like, no. Yeah.
Did you experience any, I don't know, did anybody say anything bad to you about that sort of thing? About who you were?
So at times things would happen. Like I remember, like I had a nickname from some people. They would call me Judy Ray, which was similar to my dead name. Oh, okay. Same kind of initials. Sure. So yeah, there was, like I said, there were definitely signs. We joke, like when I talk with other trans people, we always joke about, there were no signs. which that's usually right after we say something that was very obvious that we were very obviously trans even back then.
Sure.
But it's a joke line. It's like,
Yeah.
but there were no signs.
Well, tell me about that from a trans woman's experience, because my experience of being a trans man is very different.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's usually starkly different because girls, if they display athleticism and do things that boys do, at least in the culture now and the past few decades, like the 80s, the 70s, that was a thing. That was just part of the culture. You know,
Right.
there were tomboys on TV and TV shows. Like Jodie Foster often played a tomboy, or who was it? Tatum O'Neal, you know, and the Bad News Bears, etc. You know, it was part of the culture.
Yeah, we tell girls and women you can be anybody you want.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
you know,
Feminism. That's right.
That's right.
That's right. Real
And-
feminism. Real
Right.
feminism.
And with boys, we're very much like, oh no, you can't do that.
That's
you
right.
shouldn't do that. Stop
That's right.
it.
There's fear. There's fear around that, and I don't understand. I've never understood why. So, what is that experience for you as a trans woman, as a child, like to have like fears around you, and people saying maybe things to you?
Right. So, I mean, understand that at the time I didn't realize that I was trans.
Of course,
I
of course.
certainly felt wrong
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
In the standard stuff, I'd go to bed at night wishing that I could be a girl and stuff like
Okay.
that. So that was there, but I never recognized that as trans. I didn't have the language for it. I didn't have anybody that I could talk to about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was one of those things that I just, bottled up outwardly. I mean, things would leak out. I think about probably from the time that I was like 10, 11, maybe 12, I couldn't take off my shirt anymore to go swimming. I could not have told you why. The shirts and skins basketball games.
That's the experience I had as well. I did not take off my shirt when going swimming.
Right. So, I mean, so there were, things like that. I think of like the shirts and skins basketball pickup
Yes.
games that
Yeah.
I used to go to. I'd get dragged out with the guys and, we'd be doing stuff. Locker rooms were, oh my God, extremely uncomfortable for me. And again, I couldn't have told you, like if somebody had been like, hey, how come, you have, these issues with this? Why can't you take off your shirt? I would have been like, I don't know.
Did you
Like,
just
I don't feel good about that.
Did you just want to hide in those situations? Like, did you
Oh,
find?
absolutely. Oh my God.
Did you find the locker that was furthest away, or did you delay going there or something?
Yeah, or I would try very hard not to like get undressed and things like that. So, looking back on it now, I can recognize the dysphoria.
Yeah.
With both body and gender. Again, at the time I didn't have the language for it, so I
Yeah.
was experiencing it, but I didn't know what that was.
What are some of these other things that I guess you could mention about, like coping skills, I guess, or survival skills during that time?
I mean, as far as it goes, I can remember being in like high school and, just being gay in high school would be,
Yeah.
I mean, that would get your butt kicked.
Right.
Like,
Right.
there was violence against that. And, like being gay just was a slur and things like
Yeah.
that. And I wasn't gay and I never thought that I was gay.
That would have been the mid-90s?
At this point, we're talking the early to mid 90s.
Yeah.
So I graduated high school in the mid 90s and went to college from there. So, I think,
really LGBT rights, I mean, it's been a long struggle for decades, and
right.
longer than that. But it didn't really coalesce until like the late 90s and aughties, with getting like good laws on the books and corporations having non-discrimination policies and that sort of thing. So even like the mid 90s, it's still kind of not the best situation.
No, but again, I mean, not identifying as gay, like that was never anything that really entered into my mind at the time. Like I knew I was different. I knew that I felt wrong in a lot of ways, especially, being male. But
So you didn't connect with the queer community?
no, I didn't.
Okay.
So I did not have really any gay friends. I remember my first year of college, I got wrapped up into a debate in some class that I had where a friend of mine who was gay, and I, we, had a debate against each other on gay rights, and I ended up pulling the straw for the anti. Like, that's something that I feel shame about to this day.
Really?
Well,
it's an assignment.
right.
So.
It was an assignment.
Yeah.
I kind of had to do it. He ended up winning, and I was very happy for that.
Yes.
But it was one of those things that I didn't really even want to do that or feel comfortable
Right.
with it. And it's something that, yes, it was an assignment.
And
But I think about we wouldn't even have an assignment like that today.
And also, but we're having that discussion now about trans rights, right?
Right.
Why even debate people's rights, though? People should just have rights.
Well, that is kind of the thing.
Yeah.
Like everybody should have,
Just
certain,
have 'em.
just have your basic rights.
Yeah.
And, the whole where it's a debate or something like that. Like me having rights doesn't really take anything away from anyone else.
And it's not really debatable. I mean,
Right.
other people's opinion about that doesn't really matter.
I mean, that's just it. I mean, what do we want? We want the same things that like people just take for granted. Like
Yes.
I want to be able to walk downtown and not be harassed.
Get a job.
Right. I
Not
want to
get
be able
kicked
to
out of housing.
exactly. Like the kind of things that a lot of people just take for granted.
Yeah.
And end up getting taken away from us, or we get discriminated against because somebody's uncomfortable because we're transgender or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And so that we have to have debates for this, that we have to fight for this. I mean, it's really kind of upsetting, but it's not like we're the first group that's ever had to do that.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people that are still fighting for that.
That's right. Yeah.
Now.
And also, I mean, it seems like we've gone through kind of this cycle too of like things have gotten better. But then all of a sudden they've gotten really a lot worse. I would say with
visibility, people feel more threatened, I think.
With visibility, but then also like I'm not sure why the Republican Party has gotten so bad. I mean, when I was younger, they weren't that great either, but they're really bad now. I mean, they're just overtly trying to harm people.
I feel like politics in general, and this is my own personal view,
Sure.
but I feel like a lot of times when you've got a party like, if you look at the Republican platform right now, I mean, they can't really come out and say that they want to cut Social Security. They can't come out and say that they want to,
that's what they're doing.
defund a lot of programs and stuff that people really want to rely on. So you make a boogeyman, right? I mean, we've been doing that since the dawn of time. I mean, in the 1800s, it was Irish people, right?
Right.
And then, you go up through the
Slavic
20th century,
people.
like whatever it was. There's always has to be an other. And this is like, all right, we understand. We're kind of crapping on you right now. But hey, look at these guys are even worse, right? Like, let's get mad at that. A lot of this stuff, I honestly believe, I don't know that a lot of these politicians really care that much about us.
Yeah.
Or hate us as much as it's just something to distract people from. It's like, oh, hey, here's this boogeyman that you all need to worry about. Be very afraid of these people, right?
As we're picking your pockets, as we're giving PPP loans to people who do not need them,
right?
And who voted to give themselves money. Basically, we're stuck in this crony capitalism that funds wars all over the place. I mean, we've been in pretty much perpetual war since 2000. No, I mean, it even goes back further than that in the 90s. I mean, Iraq and, I mean, when do we just, have some peace at some point? I don't know. Yeah, I could go on and on and on about that. I wonder if the PPP loan thing is actually going to radicalize some people. It's really awful.
I mean, I think it is what it is. I think just like bank bailouts in the 2008 situation, like people just kind of get over it, and then there'll be something else to talk about.
I lost a business during that time. I didn't get any help.
You weren't quick enough, I guess.
Yeah, well, I wasn't slimy enough.
Right. So
anyway, speaking of that, you work in the financial sector.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
I work for a relatively large firm. So yeah, I mean, that's been something where I'm only actually recently out as trans there. So the last few weeks is when that happens.
Okay.
Because I did not start transitioning. I'm going to kind of back up the clock a little bit.
Right.
But I started medically transitioning this past April.
Yeah.
So my employer is known since June, and then because of like I'm not really in a workplace or a position where preferred names are a thing.
Yeah.
So like everything has to be changed legally before we can actually move forward with stuff.
Yes.
So
because you're overlooked by bigger entities.
I sign legal contracts. So if my name wasn't actually Cherie, I couldn't sign that name on there, and then that would be very confusing for a lot of people to have two different names. So, so in my particular case, like my name had to be changed, my gender markers had to be changed, everything else in order to get everything else updated, so that I could do business as myself. Yeah,
trans people always have to cultivate a little patience around that. Yeah. When you finally get to that point where I want to change everything now. You have to wait because you have to go through those extra
Actually,
steps.
New Hampshire has been exceedingly efficient. My name change took less than 2 days.
Oh, wow. 2 days. Oh, that's the fastest I've ever heard of it.
Yeah.
2 days.
So, super efficient here. They basically...
Up in Alaska, it can take you like a year or longer. I'm serious.
Yeah, it was a Saturday night actually in September when I was actually talking with somebody that we've got a transgender Facebook group, which I think that you're aware of.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of resources and support there. Somebody's always done something before you have.
That's a good group, by the way. I've seen a lot of internet groups with trans people, and sometimes they're a little bit contentious and kind of awful sometimes, but this one's a really good one.
People are supportive and helpful. And I mean, there's a real community with that. I do enjoy, like I go out and we hang out with some people sometimes and get to know folks. And there's some social aspects to it that are really, really nice.
Did you go out to dinner or something? Or
there's a really nice place like in Manchester that's called Boards and Brews, which is it's basically a pub. And they've got these massive wooden tables, so you can play board games. They've got a massive board game library that's there.
Great.
So you pay a cover charge. You've got a table for 3 hours, and then they seem to be a little loose with it if you're ordering food and drinks and stuff. But yeah, I mean it's a fully functioning pub but you go there and you play board games while you're there with your friends.
Do they let you try the drinks or whatever before you buy them there? There's some places that do that, like brew
I don't think so. I don't drink myself,
so
when I'm there, I just order like a Diet Coke.
Okay, yeah.
So that's not really my thing, but I mean, other people have ordered drinks. I didn't see them like asking for a sample before they got stuff.
I used to go to a place that would give you little samples, and that place was great.
Yeah, I've had them say "surprise me." I've seen that happen before, and there's some really weird stuff that comes back from the bar. But
sometimes those places have like seasonal brews, and they're just like different from whatever their main ones are.
Yeah, so that's one of our things. But I mean, so to get back on track, through that group, I was talking with a trans man, who had gone through a name change, but it was like 9 years ago. So he was telling me,
it's changed.
Expect that it's going to take a couple of months. I went onto the court website. They said 45 days, and I'm like, all right, well, I should get on this so that hopefully my plan was I would transition by like Christmas.
Right.
So that Saturday night, I filed my petition online. I paid my fee. The judge got hold of it on Monday morning, signed off on it immediately, and I was notified on Tuesday that my name had been changed.
That's awesome.
So,
that's the quickest I've ever heard it happening.
It's happened to a couple other people too. I don't know exactly what it was. I mean, I assume that they do like a background check and stuff like that. I did put right on the thing because it asks you why you're changing your name. I'm like, I'm transgender.
Yeah.
So... I guess we don't have like a publishing requirement like they have in a lot of states where you got to put it in a newspaper. It has to go in a database. They just, if you're trans, they just change your name.
For me, I had to have a court date, and I had to show up in court and say why. I didn't have to publish anything in the particular state I was in. There were some trans women there, which was kind of exciting for me. So I wasn't the only person there who was doing a gender name change. Which was great, but it goes state by state. It's
everybody has their own rules, so
yeah.
So that ended up being really quick, and then the rest of it was just dominoes falling in line. We're self-ID in New Hampshire, so driver's license got updated, and then I went to the Social Security office, and then I got my passport taken care of, and so like just everything probably within like a week. Got all that stuff taken care of, and then
within a week you got everything changed. That's amazing.
Yeah. Social Security was actually the fastest of anybody. They recently changed their thing. You don't need a doctor's letter anymore for your gender change with Social Security. You just need to have an ID that's already got it on it. So that's why driver's license first, Social Security, and then passport from there.
Yeah, that's how I did it too. I did I did ID first, and then I did Social Security and bank stuff. The bank is first place you want to go. Oh my
God. Some of the banks, like my banks were fine.
Yeah.
I mean, because I work at one, they were great. And then another one that I used to work at, and then, they were fine. The credit card companies have been the worst.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, faxing stuff in and then nothing happening, and then having to call up like 2 or 3 times, and then you're talking to people and they don't know what's going on. I've gotten, I know how to change a last name, but I don't know, I don't have the access to change somebody's first name. And it's like, okay, well, can you put me on the phone with somebody who can?
Yes.
And then you're waiting on hold for a while, and then you get somebody on, and then they're like, well, we need you to fax this in or do that. Like getting my mortgage updated. They wanted more than just IDs. They needed a social security card or a birth certificate. And
I've noticed it's really important to keep people on the phone to do that as well.
Yes.
Because if you ever hang up that phone, that's it. You have to call again, and then you have to explain the whole thing again. And so it's really important to keep people on the phone and have them do the thing right then.
Right. Yeah. So these have been things. So if you're trans and you haven't gone through this yet, just be aware, like some people are going to be pains in the butts.
Yeah. And if you need a passport, that is actually a longer process in terms of ordering it. Mm-hmm. And you do have to hand over your documents. You have to hand over all that stuff, the court order and your, and it has to be the originals. It can't be just copies, which is kind of unnerving, because it's all this really important stuff.
Well, fortunately, with court orders, you can get extra copies of them. So I got 5.
There you go.
So because I knew that there were going to be some places that were going to want to keep the original.
Yeah. Especially with the kind of work that you do and that sort of thing.
So with passports and stuff like that, they kept the original. I fortunately already had a passport before, so I got to skip out on like birth certificate and stuff because they already have that. So it was really just a passport update and renewal. That I had to go through. So that was relatively painless. And I had the passport within like 3 weeks.
Yeah. Mine was in Alaska, so it took a lot longer. It has to go through Seattle, or was it Seattle or San Francisco? I forget. But anyway, it's whatever the hub is that's in the lower 48. And so it just takes longer. Luckily, the woman in the post office was really cool to me, though. And this was, 20 years ago. And she didn't know anything, I don't think, about trans people, but she was super cool about it. She's just really professional. She was professional about it. She did her job, which was to take my documents and bundle them up and send them to the government, basically, to another branch of the government.
Here in our town, we do it at the library.
Yeah, great.
So
great. So going back to your being a trans person, we kind of skipped a couple of decades there. So after high school, what was going on?
So I went to college.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting experience. I went for theater.
Okay.
Because I don't think I was going to go to college, and then I ended up deciding. Actually, it was my senior year.
Why wouldn't you go to college? I'm just
so
curious.
I just because at first, my family dynamic is a little bit complicated, and my parents lived very far apart. My dad passed away 20 years ago now,
okay.
So at the time, I had my dad was like, hey, you should come back down to like New Mexico and live with me, and I want to open up like this restaurant and stuff, and it sounded like a really good deal.
What part of New Mexico, by the way?
In the southern part, probably just like 10 miles from the Mexican border.
Okay,
so
all right.
Way down there.
Yeah.
Little place called Columbus. At the time that I used to live there, when I was a little kid, there were probably about like 800 people there. I think last time I was there when he passed away was in 2002, and there were probably about 1,500 people that lived there in a town that land area wise was probably about the size of Rhode Island.
Okay, yeah, so, that's how Alaska is too.
It was about 20 miles north to south and about 60 east to west.
Yeah,
annexed, the village itself was relatively small, but to like Columbus is like a massive chunk of the lower part of New Mexico. So,
I understand. You ever go through Hatch?
Possibly, but I don't remember.
It's the brightest green spot of New Mexico. It's where they grow those beautiful peppers, the Hatch peppers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. No, never been there.
You dip down into this little valley, and all of a sudden it's green. It's like, wow.
There are places like that in New Mexico. So yeah, I've been through some of them, but you go from like desert to like you've got white sands, which is like real desert.
Yes.
Then you've got like the scrub deserts that are out there.
And then suddenly you go into a valley and there's a spring or something, and it's boom.
And there's like trees
green.
Everywhere. You're up in the Rockies, and there's pine trees and trees with leaves and stuff. We used to a couple of times. I've been to a place called Gila Cliff. Which is in a valley much like that. So, which doesn't, it looks completely different from much of the rest of New Mexico.
Yeah.
It's a very diverse,
is very diverse
ecological area.
Yeah. So. I'm actually headed there after I head towards Boston again for another medical appointment. I've been here in New England longer rather than going to the Midwest and the West Coast to continue my project because I needed some health care. So I have one more medical appointment there, and then I'm heading towards Texas and New Mexico for the winter,
There you go.
Yeah. I don't want to be in the snow in my car with my dog.
There you go. Yeah.
We're going to camp out.
It's not a bad place in the winter.
Yeah.
Like at night it does get really cold, but
I don't mind.
But by the morning it does warm up quite a bit.
Yeah. That's better than 6 feet of snow and buried and all that. So
yeah, where I lived there, we would get snow sometimes, but by 10 o'clock it was completely gone.
Yeah,
so,
just little.
Yeah, a little dusting.
Totally.
And they shut everything down for it.
Oh, yes. They do that with Seattle, too. Like, I lived in Seattle, and, they have a lot of rain, which is just annoying. It's just like a little, piddly little rain. But then every once in a while, we'll get cold enough so that they get a little snow, and everybody just freaks out. They totally freak out, It's kind of funny.
Yeah, not in New England.
No. They never shut anything down in Alaska. They're like, no way. I mean, maybe with this typhoon they did, but,
Right.
Other than that, no, nothing gets shut down. -50, whatever. Yeah. So back to being trans. So you're in college and you're in theater. Yeah.
I was doing theater. Something I picked up my senior year of high school. I had delusions in my head that I was going to, go into theater and stuff. So honestly, it was just a way to get into college and do something that I thought would be fun.
Sure.
I didn't want to smash my face into a plate glass window doing like accounting or, some kind of a science thing or whatever. I thought theater would be really fun. The reality of the situation that it is a lot of work, but it's very fun work. So, I like to think like when I did my senior project, I probably spent 200 hours on it.
My goodness.
But it was 200 very fun hours. Like
Were you writing a play or something?
No, I just directed a Shakespeare. It was a Midsummer Night's Dream.
Okay.
Directed
Shakespeare.
That's it. Just directed Shakespeare. So, the nice thing about Shakespeare is that, there's a lot of things with that are open to interpretation.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
You can get kind of creative with it.
That's true.
You can't do that with a lot of other plays because, the rights are still out there and
that's true.
The playwrights and the companies that hold the rights to them and stuff.
Yes.
You have to do things in a certain way.
Yes.
With Shakespeare, you can do really whatever you want.
Yes. And I love some of the campy elements in Shakespeare as well. You can really have some fun with that.
There's some great material in there. And so I ended up doing that for my senior project. It was myself, and there were other people that used that play as part of their senior project as well. So like the lighting designer.
Oh, great.
That was her senior project, right?
Yeah.
The set designer, that was his senior project. So there were 4 or 5 of us that it was our senior project that we just kind of all did it together. It was, I was
Costumer?
like, I wanted. No, the costumer was a junior, so she was not in there. But yeah, I mean, for a couple of the actors, it was also theirs. But what it came down to is that I was like, hey, I want to do a Midsummer Night's Dream, and then word got around, and then everybody was like, wait a second, we could all just like lump all of our projects into this one thing. So we all got judged on different stuff.
That's awesome.
So yeah, there were 50 of us total involved in the whole production, which was it was an incredible experience. For that, and yeah, that was just amazing. But all through college, like that whole experience of doing that.
So you did several plays like that?
I didn't direct several plays.
Okay.
Before I got to my senior project, I would be like an assistant director. I acted in some stuff. I've been in musicals. I've been in regular plays. I've had bit parts. I've had larger parts. I mean, I've done everything. And plays where I wasn't acting, I did sound design, or I helped with lighting.
What is sound design? What is that?
So, I mean, sound design is when you're in a play, there's 2 elements to it. Number one, with like larger theaters or larger spaces where the acoustics aren't really that great, the sound designer will fix microphones up in certain strategic locations.
Sure.
So if there's a part of the stage where we absolutely want to make sure that we hear something going on, but the acoustics aren't right, that it really can get out to the audience. So we might put like a microphone, somewhere on like a foam pad that will pick up that we can then pipe that into the audience. So that might be one thing that a sound designer does.
And then you have like a board that brings that up.
Yeah, so you've got a soundboard that's involved with that. And there's also going to be sound cues sometimes, right? If you're in a play, let's say that there's a thunderstorm or something. Well, somebody's got to get the sound of thunder because you're not actually going to make a thunderstorm in the theater. So your sound designer will make sure that
garbage can lids.
Right. So, just like, the lighting board operator is definitely the busier person between the two in almost any show. But the sound operator is still there to make sure that the sound levels are there and that the sound cues when the stage manager calls them out. You're there to make sure that stuff gets executed. And, if you're the designer, which when you're doing it in college, like we don't have a separate person for the board and to design. So you're doing everything with that.
Small productions, that's usually the case, right?
Still trans even back then. At the time, I grew my hair out long. I used to wear it back in a bandana with some hanging out the front. I would have friends come up to me and they'd be like my friend Chad, who I got in that debate with, on that assignment in class,
Sure.
Came up to me one day and he was like, you do realize you're queer, right?
Oh no. Oh no.
Oh my gosh. And I was like, what, me? No, come on, no way, right? Because I wasn't attracted to guys,
that label doesn't really fit a lot of people. Some people don't come up through the queer community either. I did, but there are plenty of people who don't.
Right. Yeah. So, I was always flattered, but
it's not like you're like, no, I hate queerness or whatever.
No,
it's just not you.
Right. I was just come on, really? You know? But the thing was, and people would be like, there's the way you do your hair and stuff and the way they act sometimes and stuff. And I'm like, all right, you don't even have to pretend like I'm the queerest person that's in this place. Like I'm working in a theater. Like there's plenty of, like I didn't even feel like I really deserved to be on the radar that much. But, looking back on it, like certainly, I was definitely not queer. So, but yeah, it was like, I used to love that. That was a great experience. It was a ton of fun. I did theater for a number of years after I got out of college.
Oh, great.
Community theater though. Like I determined pretty quickly that like New York and, that whole thing was not my place. I had no desire to.
It's so competitive and
No, I had no desire to go to California or anything like that. No. But there's plenty of theater. Even here in New Hampshire, there's plenty of theater to be had.
Do you still do it?
Not since I had kids, no.
Oh, okay.
So,
kids, yes. Yeah. That's the whole project right there.
Yeah. Over the years I've had all kinds of, different things that I've jumped in on. I did a radio show for an online radio station called EVE Online for 9 years.
Okay. What was that about?
So, EVE Online it's a video game that I don't play anymore, but they call it Internet Spaceships. You can look it up. It's
okay.
But yeah, it's a bunch of internet space nerds that jump into spaceships and shoot each other, and they build things, and it's a very complex game.
So it's a game that you play online with other people?
With other people. It's a massively multiplayer online game.
Okay.
Came out, I think, a little bit before World of Warcraft came out. It was like 2003. Okay. And it's still running today, although, in my opinion, it's not as good as it used to be, which is probably why I don't play it anymore. But
did it get kind of stuck in a...
Well, it's just over time, the original developers start to filter out, new people come in, and then they want to change up a bunch of things. And so, I did that for 9 years. And then, from there, I started getting into other stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Other kinds of games or just...
Yeah, and this is the thing, like before I came to terms with being trans, like video games was a huge escape for me.
I've heard that a lot from trans people.
Yeah.
Different kinds of games too, like board games, pinball, computer games, whatever. Yeah.
So for me, like that was a huge thing. I was big into video games for a long time. A lot less so now. I still play games, from time to time. I might get on for a half an hour here or there, a couple hours on a weekend or something. But it's become a much lower part of my life now because I'm not coping anymore.
Yes. Well, also it sounds like I've never been involved in any of that kind of community, but it does sound like a community, like it's a social outlet for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Gaming is.
For a person that was, dealing with gender dysphoria and not fully realizing what that was, not wanting to go out, not being able to look at myself in a mirror.
Yeah.
Being online where it's just, you're on voice communications with people. Nobody's looking at you.
Right.
And it doesn't matter like how you're dressed and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think of COVID as kind of having a peak, and now we're kind of...
A lot of trans people came out during COVID.
Yeah, we're kind of on the other side of that.
Right.
Now, what happened in that time period that you think has
that
happened?
Crack the egg, so to speak?
Yeah. I don't even know how to say it. Has allowed people to understand themselves better and then come out, I guess.
Yeah. So, so part of it is, if I like my coming out situation was. Basically, it probably starts in December, which is when my birthday is.
Sure.
And blowing out the candles on my cake and wishing probably for like the dozenth time that I could just be a girl.
Okay.
And again, hey, there were no signs, right, as we say. But yeah, still, even at that point, did not fully accept that I was trans or even really fully know it. It was just like one of those things. At that point in time, I thought that everybody question their gender sometimes. I thought that everybody, at least sometimes, must wish that they were the opposite, that they were the opposite gender. And in January, when I found out that that wasn't the case, that's when it like absolutely shattered me.
And how did you find that out?
I was reading some stuff online. Like I started really questioning come January.
Okay.
That I'm like, okay, you know what? Like I think about this stuff an awful lot.
Had you been around any trans women or trans men before?
I've met one that I know of in my life back a very long time ago. I was in a sales position and I had run into somebody who was a trans woman who was very obviously trans, who was, buying a product, and I had spoken with her and things like that. I remember, seeing her driver's license, and her name was Amy, but her driver's license still said that she was male. I mean, there was a lot to that. And I remember just thinking like how incredibly brave she must be to be able to do that. Like I could never.
So that really,
never do anything
that really
like that.
stuck with you.
But that's something, like. I mean, that must have been 10 years ago. And again, you could have asked me the next day, are you trans? I'm like, no, I'm definitely not like her. I don't have the guts to do something like that. Like, would I, if I thought that I could have done it and like gotten away with it or whatever, like, I would have, but again, didn't realize that was what trans was. And so like after like this past January, I started really questioning. I'm like, I'm thinking about this an awful lot. So I go online and I start, reading like blogs and stuff like that. And I came across this one blog. It was called Curvy and Trans. It's written by Jocelyn Badgley. She's the one that, if you've ever heard of the Gender Dysphoria Bible.
Nope.
Really? Okay. So, well, she wrote that. And so this was the blog that she had before the Gender Dysphoria Bible came out.
Sometimes cultural stuff between trans men and trans women is very different. Yeah.
Well, the Gender Dysphoria Bible does cover both.
Okay. So. Also, I was kind of cloistered in my cabin in Alaska for a while.
Gotcha.
And then before that, I was at Harvard, so I was kind of cloistered there and just doing that. So in some ways, what's happened in the trans community has kind of passed me by.
Gotcha.
So I'm sometimes surprised at what has happened. I'm even surprised at some of the bigotry too, like that's out there. Like I didn't know that some of this stuff was happening. Anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, so I came across that, and that was when I was reading through, and it was mentioned that cisgendered people don't really question their genders.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But
so,
I think gender's
probably not to the extent that I was.
No, not to the extent that trans people do, but I think that gender, I mean, that's why it's such a contentious topic. And that's why people perform hypermasculinity and hyperfemininity, and they get the pumped up trucks, and they, do glitter, glitter, glitter. I mean, I think it's everybody's issue. I don't think that it's just trans people's issue.
I think that, and this is totally anecdotal, but when I've talked with cis people, because I had to confirm this, and I also have 2 trans cousins, who came out before I did, but and we've talked about it as well, where they've gone and they've asked like their cis friends, and when I was speaking with my partner, and I'm like, do you ever question it? She's like, no. Right? She wakes up in the morning, she just knows that she's a woman, and she does her woman stuff, and she doesn't give a second thought to it. And I'm like, oh wow, so
that's because it's considered the norm of society,
right?
Yeah,
and that's where
but
it is.
I do think that cisgendered people do think about their gender. I do think
if they could switch it for a day or something. Like I've heard some people admit to that.
Yeah. I think over time it changes too. Like being a girl versus being a woman versus being an elderly woman. Those are very different experiences of life. And, it may be the same gender, but it's different gender expression there, I think.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, I guess with gender expression, but at the same time, like whether, you're a girl or a woman or an older woman, like, still recognize that you're on the female side of the spectrum. When I thought back to all of the time that I've spent questioning that, all of the time that I had spent throughout my life going to bed and wishing that I could just wake up as the opposite sex. And
also we have the culture around us that reinforces who we are,
right?
And for a trans person, it's in opposition,
right?
Yeah.
So there is that, and so it was coming to terms with that piece.
Yeah.
And then I just had that moment where I stopped reading. I was probably 3 days into reading like all kinds of blogs and stuff like that, and I stopped.
Any other ones that you can recommend, by the way, that you think are pretty good?
I spent a lot of time on Trans Reddit.
Okay.
And there were a lot of like stories on there of, people, there's some very trans supportive Reddits that are out there that are heavily moderated to keep, like transphobia out of them and stuff like that.
Yeah. Because it's kind of scary just going on the internet. There's all kinds of stuff on there,
Yeah.
Some of it is
so
pretty
I
bad.
found that Reddit's been a relatively positive experience for me.
Yeah.
And
those heavily moderated spaces.
Right. The heavily moderated spaces. Yeah. So there's, trans and there's transgender and there's, MTF and I mean, on your side, there's FTM.
Right.
So there's a lot of really affirming, trans spaces in there, and you can go in there and you don't even really have to type anything because it's open. Anybody can read it. And just reading other people's stories. And there's tons of stuff on there of people as they're, coming out and, coming to realize the situations that they might have had with their significant others and stuff like that, which, as a person that was just coming to terms with being transgender and realizing like, holy crap, this is me.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful for me to see like what other people were going through, the things that they were dealing with and how they handled it.
What would you say to other people who might be searching this sort of thing? What's a good idea to avoid if you're looking on the internet about trans people?
Twitter.
Okay, yes, I agree. There's a lot of hatred on Twitter.
There's some good stuff on Twitter too, but you just have to be really careful because on Twitter anybody can interact with anybody.
That's right.
With the new Elon Musk thing coming, they were very strict on a lot of the slurs and stuff that were used against us. Yeah. All of that, to my understanding, has been lifted now. Like, so people aren't getting suspended for calling us groomers anymore, and so it's a little bit more Wild Westy.
I think that they got tough with the groomers thing, but I've had people threaten me on Twitter, and Twitter doesn't do anything about it. They do nothing, and there's accounts on there that spread misinformation, which is known as a lie. Yes. We call it misinformation. It's euphemistic. It's a lie. They spread lies about trans people. It's very harmful. They encourage terrorism against trans people, and they still have accounts, and they still have all these tweets up.
Absolutely. So, and don't get me wrong, like I am on Twitter. I have a number of friends, like two of my best friends are also on Twitter. That's how I met them, and we, sit down and we talk an awful lot now. And, which is great, but I mean, my block list has thousands of accounts on it.
Oh, I understand. So what else would you avoid on the internet? Because there's a lot of sensationalistic content out there.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I try not to get involved with a lot of stuff. Like I'm peripherally aware of J.K. Rowling and the stuff that she spouts.
Right.
And the gender critical movement, which is really big right now in the UK, and I've got a lot of friends out there that are dealing with that stuff. So I'm aware of those things. Generally, I mean, don't engage with because there's people out there, they're like the what is a woman crowd and everything else. The answer to that, by the way, is anybody she wants to be.
That's right.
But
that's right.
But they're like, it's, that crowd out there, they're not interested in having a debate or whatever. They're just in there to, my experience with people in real life are generally nice and don't go out of their way to be absolute jerks. Even if they're feeling that way, they'll keep it quiet. They don't say the quiet parts out loud, but on the internet.
Maybe they're ignorant.
Right. Or they're ignorant to it,
fine.
or whatever. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But I will say, like in my personal life, like in real life, going out, if I go to the grocery store or to the mall or if I'm at work or anything like that, I have not experienced any transphobia from any person. Part of that is
wonderful.
I mean, I don't know how many people, realize that I'm trans just, passing by or in a short interaction or something like that. I think that, a lot of people just, don't think one way or the other. And which is, perfectly fine. The people that do know are generally very nice to me and accepting. Even people that I thought in no way ever would have been. But I think that, when you're face to face with somebody, they're a lot less likely to be a jerk to you than somebody who's got like a monitor and a keyboard between the two of you.
Right.
Where they feel like they can be brave because they're, I think about, all the trans people that I really look up to and respect.
It's definitely not bravery.
Right. But I think about like, my Twitter has my picture on it.
Sure.
Right. And like, it's got my actual first name is on there as well. And, a lot of my friends and the other trans people that I interact with, we're all the same. And then the people that are harassing us, they don't have a profile picture, or it's a soccer field, or it's a cartoon character or something like that. And their names are always some weird, thing that's out there. And
the ones that get me are the ones that have like 13 followers or something.
Oh, all the time.
It's like
because they get blocked and then they open a new account or whatever the case is, or maybe they're a bot. I don't know, but it's always that.
I consider Twitter just a portal for abuse. Basically, that's what I call it.
Yeah. Like I said, if you interact with
careful.
people and then you're just very quick to not interact with and just block out the people
Yes.
that attempt to harass you.
Yeah, because that's all they're on there for. They're not really debating these issues. They're just there to abuse you.
That's it.
They're there to hurt you, to harm you in some way.
Yeah.
They don't care about the issues
No.
themselves. They just want to hurt you.
So that's it. And then when somebody does do something like that, first, don't take it personal, right? Because they're just a jerk. And my honest belief is that, in order, like, because I try to think of it, like, what would it take for me to want to spend a significant amount of time online just trying to abuse random strangers, because they're transgender or, something that I disagree with? Like, do I have better things to do? And yes, I really do.
Yeah.
So
it's just not worth it.
Like, maybe
it's
you're
not
just
worth your time.
Right. So maybe you're just a miserable person. And that's one of the ways that you maybe make yourself feel better is to drag other people down or try to.
I see that there's some pretty good activism on the internet. Like people post things that are going on, legislative stuff or stuff from the UK, which is really a bad situation going on there. Or, they tell us about, these groups like that are doing terrorism and whatnot. But when we're just interacting with transphobes or homophobes or whatever, that really isn't activism.
No.
Okay. All it does is it eats you up. It wastes your time. It stresses you out. You're
never going to bring a person around.
You're not going to bring anybody around. And nobody's going to see it. Only you are seeing it.
Right.
A lot of those conversations are suppressed because it's BS.
Inflammatory.
It's inflammatory. It's BS. It's hidden usually. Nobody sees that stuff. So just cut it off. It has nothing to do with you, yourself, and your ego. Just cut it off. Cut it off.
So
cut
I agree.
off all those conversations. It's just, I mean, I say this, and you probably say this after having gotten into many of these discussions, but at a certain point you just learn that push that block button. Push the mute
right
button.
to the block, because you'll never get that time back.
Boom. No, you never get it back.
And it is wasted time.
Yeah, and then go into your community and talk to some church people about starting a transition closet or something at their church. Go and form a peer-to-peer support group.
Yeah.
Go accompany somebody to their medical appointment. That sort of thing.
That's it. And for my part, the thing that I've picked up so that I could, kind of contribute a little bit back to the community is I'm the New Hampshire ambassador for LGBT Outdoors.
There you go.
That came about. So my
LGBT Outdoors, is that like a national thing?
It is a 501c3 nonprofit national. That's our mission is to connect the LGBTQIA plus community to the outdoors, because it is a space where we tend to be underrepresented.
Yes.
I think a lot of people, you think about, I think about just women in general around here, or really anywhere, going out, walking in a place where there's not a lot of people, especially like in the later afternoon or something like that. Like even for myself, if I see a man coming from the other direction, like I get a little bit nervous because I don't know if that's a safe person or not.